Good evening, guys. Today we're going to talk about box and whisker plots, which goes into this how are the dispersion, how are we going to describe our dispersion of our data. That means how close or how far apart, what does our data look like. So let's go ahead and get started on what a box and whisker plot is. All right, your essential question I need you to be able to answer is, how can you use box and whisker plots to describe a data set? Here is what everything means in any box and whisker plot that you see. This first point right here is your smallest value in your data, and that means that last point right here is your greatest value in your data. Okay, the second point, okay, that we draw a line in between the last to the second point is where your 25% of the data lives, smallest data, and we call that the first quartile, okay? So from the second point to this third point, okay, is where our median, our middle number lives, is right here, okay? We draw a box between them. In 25, another 25% of our data lives here in between that first and that second and third point, okay? In between our middle number and the next point is where 25% of the data lives. Another 25, so we're at 75% of the data. We know where it lies. Now, from that third point to that fourth point is where the last 25% of our data is. So it kind of tells you, it breaks the data up into 1/4, okay? So you can tell where 1/4 of the data lives. If we're looking at this range right here, we can tell that between our first quartile and right here is called our second quartile is where a big chunk of our data lives, or big range of our data, because it's bigger in our box. Okay, so the whiskers are just how we connect our first point to our first quartile and our last point to our third quartile. Okay. When you're asked to describe the dispersion using a box and whisker plot, we're talking about what is this interquartile range. That's the third quartile minus this first quartile value. So you're telling me how much of the data, what's the range of the data right here? Because this is 50% of the data lives right there, 50%. 25 lives there, and another 25 lives there. That's how we're reading our box and whisker plots. All right, let's practice making them. So we're given the basketball players' scores, and we're going to make a box and whisker plot out of it. So the first thing we need to do is put our data points in order. So we have 5, then we'll have 14, then we'll have 2 16s, then we'll have 20, 22, 28, and then 30. Now I have to break my data points into 25%. So I'm going to find halfway. So first data point, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and 8. I have 8 data points. So I'm going to go halfway in between them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right here is our halfway point for our middle number. So our middle number, our median is halfway in between 16 and 20, which is 18. Okay, so on my box and whisker plot, I'm going to put a point at 18. Okay, that's our middle number, and this is where our box, the middle of our box, is going to be. All right, now here I'm going to break this up into two separate chunks. Now I'm going to find halfway between those 2 separate chunks. So here's the first quartile, and here, right here, is going to be our third quartile. So it's halfway in between 14 and 16 is 15. So our first quartile is 15. What's halfway in between 22 and 28? If you can't remember it off the top of your head, remember you do 28 plus 22, and then you divide it by 2, okay, which is 25. So halfway in between 22 and 28 is 25. This is where your third in your first quartile range. So 18, let's go by twos. 20, 22, 24, 26. Right here at 25 is my third data point. 18, 16, 14, 12, 10. Okay, right here at 15 is where my second point is. Here's how I'm connecting my box. Now let's draw in our whiskers. Our whiskers are our highest and our lowest. So right here is going to be 30. Our highest point is right here, whisker. Our lowest point is 5, 10. I gotta go way down here. 5, I didn't make my number line big enough. Okay, and now we've made our box and whisker plot. 25% of the data lies right here. 25% of the data lies right here. 25% of the data lies right here. And 25% of the data lies right here. All right, let's go to example 2. Okay, so the box and whisker plot for example 2 is already made. And now let's go ahead and let's find and interpret the range and interquartile range of the data. So the range of the data goes from 18 to 30. So the range of the data is 30 minus 18, which is 12. The interquartile range, remember for that, we take the third quartile minus the first quartile. So 29 minus 23, what is 29 minus 23? That is 6. Okay, so the range of the data, what does it mean when we have a range of 12? That means the data is spread out across 12 ages. There's 12 years. The data is spread out from 12 years. Okay, but 50%, half of the data, because this is what we just found right here, half of the data has a 6-year age gap. Okay, that's what we just found. 50% of the data has a 6-year age gap, okay, but the ages range from 12, ranges by 12 years. Okay, now we're going to describe the distribution of the data. When you're asked to describe, you're going to start off by 25% of the data, and we're going to look at this first half of our data, okay, is in between age 18 to 23. 25% of the data is 18 to 23 years old, okay? And you can say 25% of the data is 23 to 25 years old. Then we can say the middle number is 25, middle number, M-I-D-D, middle age is 25 years old. 25% of the data goes from age 25 to age 29, okay, years old. And then last but not least, 25% of the data is from 29 to 30 years old. Okay, you could also tell me that the youngest age is 18 and the oldest age is 30. These are good examples of how to describe the distribution of data. All right, go ahead and try making this box and whisker plot on your own for number of DVDs your class owns. When you're ready to check your box, let me know. All right, guys, here we go. You should have gotten a box and whisker plot that looks very similar to this, okay? Your first quartile is 23, your middle number is 27, and your third quartile is 30.5. Go ahead and answer this essential question and take that checkpoint. I hope you guys have a good night.